In the first session, we talked about teaching. What are the factors that we need to consider? And then what is the learning aspect, how learner learns it, and how learning happens, and how teacher, through his teaching, trying to facilitate learning. In that perspective, we are trying to understand that what is the thing. So in that process, we have understood what is the taxonomy of learning in terms of the domains, in terms of various classifications that we have in each domains, in terms of cognitive, affective, psychomotor, and how these three domains are blended in the form of writing a statement called learning objectives. And that objective, how it facilitates your teaching learning process, is directions, and the way you want to do the assessment, all these directions can be seen from your self-constructed learning objectives. Then how, when you want to go into the classroom, then you are supposed to look into other various factors which are to be considered in terms of the knowledge, in terms of the learner, in terms of the learning resources, in terms of the learning experiences that you provide, and the kind of assessment that you want to do. So till that process we have discussed in the first session. Now taking forward from that, now we talk about now learning objectives is the initial point that we try to write from the teacher perspective. Now from the student perspective, if you want to see that, so we call that, we now reframe it as learning outcomes. Okay, so the teacher may ask, what is the difference between learning objectives and learning outcomes? It is the learning objective is the initial point that the teacher designs, pre-decides, and what is that path one has to adopt and how he is going to travel that path, and finally what is the outcome of that. So the outcome is the final resultant activity after the experiences in the learning. So that is what we call it as learning outcomes. It is the final terminal points that we are trying to look at it. Now the learning we want to see in terms of the learning outcomes, and these learning outcomes are designed in a very more broader terms. Even if you have read the NEP 2020 document, even it also talks about attaining the learning outcomes. So what are these learning outcomes? How do we look at it? So this learning outcome is focusing on developing the competencies, okay, in the content, subject, languages, or through class transactions. So what are these competencies? How is these competencies are derived from, and how one acquires it, attains it? This is what we have to look at it. Okay, it is a developing the competencies. So that means here competencies are there already within the learner. Okay, because of his hereditary factor or trait factor, social factor, or environmental factor, he has possessed that. Now we need to nurture that, nourish that, and try to flourish that. That is what we try to do it as a competency. So that is a developing activity. We are not going to reconstruct anything. It is already existing in the learner. So we are trying to enrich that through your subject, through language, and through your class transactions. Next is, can be measured. So competencies, learning outcomes, which are in terms of competencies, can be measured qualitatively or quantitatively. So that means here, so that means the outcomes that I am going to see can be measured. So when I want to measure it, I must have a tool, instrument. So in that instrument, I should have a scale built into that instrument. Okay, when you say I am conducting a test to assess my subject knowledge possessed by the learner, you say I am constructing a test for 25 marks or 50 marks or 100 marks, means you are using a scale of 25 marks or a scale of 50 or a scale of 100. On that scale, you are trying to measure how each individual has performed it in terms of his attainment of learning through the assessment of his responses. So you will assess them and you will get a numerical value. That numerical value, you say it as quantity. And that quantity, you can plot that on a numerical scale of 1 to 50 if you are measuring it. At what mark he has obtained. If you say it is 35, you'll put him at 35. One student has obtained 48, you'll put it at 48. And according to that, you will be able to see where this learner is positioned on my measuring scale. So you're talking about the quantity. Now, when you say a person has obtained 48, another has obtained 38, then what is the indication of these two? They are the two different learners, and one learner has performed extremely well, 48 marks. Another person, 35, he has also performed, but still requires many more things to be performed better. Okay, when you try to interpret in that way, then you are trying to do it qualitatively. Okay, trying to understand the individual's abilities and trying to define it in a very qualitative manner. And the quality is a relative term. And you are going to define that relativeness with your reference only, with your context only. You cannot generalize it. You cannot take some other reference and say this quality is good or bad. No, you have to define it within your context only, within your conditions only. It is a relative term. So therefore, it may varies. Okay. So it is in that way we try to look at it. So, and we also tried that assessment being an integral part of teaching learning process activities, it determines to what extent these things, competencies can be attained. So that means assessment becomes a tool to know the each individual's competencies. So according to this 21st century demand, challenges of 21st century demands, learning outcomes are defined as the expectations, competencies, and skills a learner needs to acquire to groom themselves into a good citizens, contributing to making an egalitarian country. So this is the broad aspiration of the learning outcome expressed in National Education Policy 2020. Okay, so when you define your learning outcomes means that statement should have these qualities. It should highlight what is the expectation that is desired from your subject, and by learning that, what is that knowledge, competencies, or any other competencies one is going to develop, and through that competencies, how is that competency is transformed into skills practice. So it is in that way, transforming all these activities, we are trying to create a good citizen and make the country more proud by making a creative and productive, useful citizen to the country in any way, any manner. So that is what the learning outcomes are there. And since our classrooms are structured, so that is here, we have a definite number of students present in the class. So we have a definite timetable to be carried out every day. And at the end of the semester, we have the definite attainable point that we need to do. So all these things are very structured. Okay, so therefore our activities are not unstructured. It is not haphazard. So it is always systematic, structured. And therefore, as a teacher, you are going into the classroom to attain a definite goals every day, so that at the end of the semester, we are going to attain the target of attaining the course learning outcomes. Okay, the end of your course means the course learning outcomes needs to be attained. So through the course, we are trying to attain the program learning outcomes. Whatever the program your college or institution is offering, that program outcome has to be visualized. So therefore, everything is structured. So it is not unstructured. So therefore, your way of teaching, the way you want to address the learning situation also must be looked at in a very, very structured way. Next. So in that process, we say that learner is always encouraged to interact, share, cooperate, and communicate. Okay, as a product of learning. So it is not only by your teaching learning is happening. So the learning outcome we want to say in terms of student internalizing the knowledge, applying that knowledge in any given context, and expressing it in a desired manner whenever it is expected to do it. So it is in these ways a learner has to demonstrate that. So these are demonstrable competencies which one can observe in any given context. So it is in that way, it is says that whatever we are trying to visualize as a learning outcome is adopting a process-based learning approach. So that means here they are not going to consider other approaches as we have seen earlier. So we are focusing more on process-based learning approach. So that means your learning is giving more emphasis on the process of learning than the product of learning. Okay, if your process is assured, then your product is guaranteed. Okay, so therefore your assurance in the process activity itself is more important. So you have to adopt that. And even it says that teacher and learners both should work as co-learners, co-active participant partners. Okay, so both of you are learning, both of us are learning in the same context, same situation. And therefore, by doing this, they say it is providing accountability both on the teacher as well as on the learner. Okay, as a teacher, you are trying to account for what reasons you are there in the class, in what ways you have empowered the learners in doing that activity. And learner is also accountable to say that I am in the classroom, I should have this abilities, new knowledge, new skills that I need to obtain. So that accountability falls on both of them. By ensuring this activity, by doing this activity, then we are going to say that there is a quality education that is being provided in the classroom can be ensured. So this is what it is talking about. And it also provides scope for inclusion of ICT and assessment practices. Okay, your learning outcomes give scope, chance, opportunity for you to include ICT, that is technology-based activities into your classroom, and use even ICT for assessment practices and bring that as learning. So whatever you are trying to do as learning, both for teacher as well as for learners, both can learn how assessment is going to be done. So therefore, it is in that context we talk about, and therefore providing scope for reforms in examination system also. So by incorporating all the changes envisioned and visualized in the policy and the expected way, so we can see that these are the things that we can talk about. So finally, we can conclude that learning outcomes means we can put it in a mathematical equation forms. It is equal to curricular expectation plus competencies and skills involved in the subject knowledge. Okay. Now, for example, what is the curricular expectation of a mathematics teacher? Okay, I hope there are mathematics teacher here. What do you expect your students to obtain competencies by teaching mathematics? If maths teachers are there, kindly react to that. Or anybody from your subject background, you can react from taking your subject as the background.
Yes, sir. Good evening. We are from commerce background, sir, and we expect students to apply that accounting knowledge into practicalities.
Accounting knowledge into practicality. Yes, fine, madam. So for doing that, okay, that is your curricular expectation. For doing that, what are the competencies you try to develop in them?
Sir, we inculcate all the accounting practices, rules and regulations for there we teach.
Okay, you are not clearly audible, madam. Okay.
Sorry, sir, heavy rain.
Yes. So that means here for doing the accountancy in the real life context, you should understand the basic ideas of accountancy. What is credit, what is debit, what is profit, what is loss. Okay. Then how to represent that in a tabular form. Okay, by doing the tallying activity, or by preparing the budgeting activity, trying to know where is the source of income and the way in which it has been expenditure has been done, and how is that activity can be done at home. Can that accountancy can be maintained at home also? Can I say that, can I expand that activity to the state level, district level, or the national level, or the international level? How that expansion happens? So you are trying to provide that competencies through knowledge, your subject knowledge. Okay, through that knowledge, you are trying to develop them the skills of doing the tallying, trying to know the source of information, from where do I get that authentic source? How do I cross verify that? How do I put that? Then how do I put that as accountancy? And how do I certify that these are tallying and this is the exact process of doing it? So it is that kind of knowledge that we try to look at it. Okay. So similarly, as I said, from mathematics, we expect that every learner who learns mathematics at any stage must become a problem solver of any kind at any level. How does problem solving abilities obtained? Okay, by reading the problem. So I need to read the problem. I need to analyze the problem. I need to disintegrate the problem into smaller steps. I have to use the knowledge that I have processed to solve the simple one and try to address the holistic problem. So I may recollect various formulas. I may recollect various theorems. I may recollect various axioms. I try to use them, blend them, and try to find a solution to that. So it is this kind of analysis, synthesis, reasoning, logical reasoning, deductions, okay, and then drawing conclusions. All these are my competencies. So when I do that, I get the skill as problem solving skills. Okay, similarly, language teachers are there. What is the curricular expectation of language learning? Developing your communication skills. So by developing a communication skills means I must develop my language vocabulary, word building activity, sentence construction activity, paraphrasing activity, speaking activity. So when I do all these kinds of activities only, I transform that into my skills, which I call it as LSRW skills, listening skills, speaking skills, reading skills, writing skills. So when I hone them, when I'm proficient in any one of them, I look for the occasions in that area. If I'm good in speaking, then I can go for looking into various job opportunities, which gives more scope for speaking activity. It is like anchoring, becoming a announcer in any media, any journal. Okay, it is like these kinds of job I am going to look at. I'm good in writing, I can go into journalism. I can try to become editor. I can do some of the writing activities, creative writing activities. Okay, so it is like this. My development of language abilities must enable me to obtain some skills, which I can put it into action in reality and try to develop my own way of looking at the occasional opportunities, or I may become myself entrepreneur. I may start doing independent work, startup work can be done, giving employment to others who are interested in the same areas. So it is in that way, my learning in my classroom must enable them to empower them to see the knowledge in a wider spectrum, apply the knowledge in that relevant manners, and try to get the relevant solutions. So only then we say that this learning outcome is going to be more realistic rather than only trying to test them in the given formats. So it is in that way we say the learning outcomes are testing the curricular expectations and trying to understand what competencies they derive from learning that particular subject discipline, and in relation to that discipline, what are the relevant skills that are there. One has to master that and try to use them in practical reality. If that is happening, then we say it is a learning outcomes. We are only testing the competencies of learning, then we are not testing the subject knowledge mastery. Okay, subject knowledge mastery is not so desirable at the present context. We require the way in which they are going to apply that knowledge into different conditions and try to get a different kinds of solutions for the existing problems that they encounter. If that is the case, only then we say the learning is complete. the learning is meaningful, the learning is more productive. It is in that way we try to see that. So therefore, all our assessment now is shifting from testing the content knowledge to testing the competencies. So in the meaning saying that we are not focusing more on the content knowledge, but we are trying to see how that content knowledge that they have mastered is going to be applied in a given different real life context. So that is what the purpose of framing learning outcomes and trying to use that as a tool for assessment. So assessment, as we know that it is an integral part of the teaching learning process. It has to be carried out continuously, not at the end activity. So it is a continuous activity from the class point first minute till the last minute of your class. You can use the assessment, and that assessment will enable you to do varieties of activities in the class. What are the major functions that we try to see here? One is to facilitate learning. Okay, it is not only testing them, not only trying to know where he stands and what is the position of him on a scale. It is not the purpose. If that is the case, if he is there in 35 point, now how do I make him to move to 45 point? So that must be your criteria of doing assessment. If he is already in 48, how do I make him to become attain 50? So that should be your thing. So any learner, whatever is the position he has attained, making him to move ahead is the purpose of your assessment. If that has been not done, only reporting it, it is not the true sense of assessment. So through that, you can also try to see how your stated objectives or outcomes are attained. They have been mastered. You have attained those objectives or not, you can test that. And you can also see how your motivation, your testing is motivating them by making them students realize his own strength, making him to say that, yes, I should also improve. I should also be aligning with my models who are there in the class. I should also match with them. And if possible, I can also excel them. These factors, internal factors must be encouraged among the learners in terms of motivation. And then it should be able to monitor, it should be able to assist and improve the learning outcomes. If these are being done, then you say this is also one of the important function of the learning. So if you say assessment from the learning perspective, this must be considered. Second, if you're taking that assessment as a teacher, then is your teaching more effective? If this question is asked, and if you want to get the answer, then where do you get the reply? You have to see in your own class, in terms of the expressions that this learner show in your classroom, the way the student react to your class in the classroom itself. So it is in that way you can try to understand how it is effective or not effective or ineffective. If it is so in any other case, then how do I try to address those issues? Where are the lacuna in that? Then how do I improve upon that? So this reflective practices is going to be done. And if it is for institutional purposes or for your professional requirements, if this is the case, then we try to do the assessment in terms of grades and standards. Like your institution might have gone for NAAC accreditation. Your institution might have got B, B plus, A plus grades. What are those indicators? What it means to that? If your institution is A plus, means you are all of you or all the institution is providing all quality education there. Is it the case? If something is B, B plus, is that not providing that quality? What is that? It is only grading them and trying to see where is the status and where is the scope for further improvement. That is what the thing is. Okay. So it is for that purpose only we have the grades and we have the standards. And these are some of the functions of your assessment that we try to do it. And you should know what purpose you are trying to adopt the assessment and how it is going to do that. Now, when we come to do that in the classroom processes, in any subject, any level, so we say that our assessment process starts with framing a question paper or a test paper. For preparing that test paper also, we need to prepare, we need to plan, we need to consider varieties of factors that are there to be addressed and which should not be compromised. So that what we call it as the table of specification, or it is a blueprint. Earlier it was called as blueprint, or it was also called three-dimensional chart, 3D chart. What are those three dimensions? These are the three dimensions that we need to consider while preparing that table. So it is a table having a columns and rows. Okay. The first column, if you are going to say first row, if you take that, the first cell is divided into two parts by writing a diagonal. On the first top of the diagonal, we write objectives. On the below of the diagonal, we write the content. So the first cell have two directions. One is the row wise, one is the column wise. Okay, two dimensions have come. So within these two dimensions, the binding factor of these two dimensions is the questions. Okay, the one is weightage to content, weightage to objectives, and the third one, which combines both objectives of the content and the objectives, is the questions that we frame. And we have varieties of forms of questions that can be formed. Among them, we have two major types of questions. One is subjective type questions that we can frame, which we classify them as short answer question and long answer question or essay type of questions. And these we classify them based on the mark and the number of sentences or the paragraph that has to be written. Based on this, we try to classify them. And these demand the subject knowledge, more in-depth reflection on subject knowledge, and the mastery of that subject knowledge has to be reflected through the responses. Other type of question is, we are going to measure them in objective type, where the question is trying to measure only one single objective and demands only one single definite answer only. Whereas your subjective type doesn't demand one single answer, it may have diversified answer. Student can give in multiple ways and trying to address them in different ways. So these objective type questions can be seen in terms of MCQs, multiple choice questions, matching type, completion type, yes or no type, true or false type, analogy type, etc. So if you have undergone any of the public examinations, common entrance examination or teacher eligibility test or NET, JRF or NET examinations, in all these things you might have seen these kinds of questions. So these are different types of questions that we try to say. So we need to put that, you need to decide how many questions you are going to construct, okay, on which content area you're going to construct, under which cognitive domains we are going to construct, cognitive process objectives. How many of them will come under remembering aspects? How many will come under understanding? How many in application? How many in analysis? How many in evaluation? How many in creative? So the first three lower level, we call it as lower order thinking questions. If you are focusing on remembering, understanding, and application, if you are only concentrating and trying to give a question, so we call that as only focusing and demanding only lower order thinking abilities. And this type of thinking order is reflected in the question paper in the form of what, when, where. Okay, so what, when, and where, if you are trying to use that, they are only demanding a lower order thinking abilities. If you are trying to ask why and how, going for their own self reasoning, giving scientific explanation, having their own discussions on that, then we say it is a higher order thinking ability questions. So if you look at the CBSE question, they say LOT question, lot questions, and HOT question, hard questions, higher order thinking questions. So based on the cognitive process abilities, these questions are classified. So accordingly, you can try to. Even your higher order thinking question can be situational based, or it can be context based. So like a paragraph is given, read the paragraph and answer the following questions. Okay, read it, analyze it, and try to answer the given questions. So that can also be created, that you can try to look at it. So it is in that way, we try to first define the table, define how many questions we are constructing, under what forms, what objectives, and what for what criteria you have, and what is the marking that we have. So once the questions are there, we say that we have to prepare the marking scheme along with it. Okay, So you should know what is the answer you are going to give and what is the weightage of marks that you are going to assign to them. Usually objective type are only 1 mark questions. If the correct answer, you'll get 1. If it is a wrong answer, you'll get 0. So there is no in between responses for that. So either 1 or 0. Whereas subjective type, you cannot make it very absolutely exact correct answer or incorrect answer. Even there could be partial answer also written. So we give in between marks also depending on the value points that you have looked for the responses in a given question. So based on that, you try to look at your subjective type questions. So you have to decide what is your marking questions and the time for this particular test. Okay, it is for 1 hour, 2 hour, 50 marks, 100 marks. All these criteria you have to look into accordingly. You have to define that. Then, so when you write a question, whatever kind of question, whether it is subjective or objective type, we are going to write. So we say these are the things you must see in your questions that you are trying to frame. Okay. First, you should ensure that whatever question you have framed, have you used the simple language in that? Because it is to be addressed, responses is to be given by your learners only. So your question that you have written, the language that you have written, is it understandable, comprehensible by your students? They are familiar with that language or not, that word or not. You must be familiar with that and use only those terms, those words which are familiar to your students. That we call it a simple language. It must be self-instructional as well as self-directional. So when I read the question should tell me what is this is trying to demand as a response. It is self-directional. And it should also indicate to what extent I must write the answer. If it is 1 mark question, how much I must write. If it is 2 mark question, how much I must write. If it is 5 marks, 10 marks question, what is that I should write. So it should able to tell him by reading it. So it must be self-instructional as well as self-directional also. Component must be built into your question. It must indicate the exact responses demanded by the question. What is that you are trying to look at it? Your content area may be very vast. You are asking a one particular theme. On that theme, you are asking a question, and that theme may expand in multiple ways. So, where is that boundary you are looking at? That you should also try to look into that. Like essay type, when you go to public examination, they say your answer should be written only in 300 words or maximum 500 words. Word limit is there, or it may be given in terms of number of pages, 1 page or 2 page responses. Okay, so when the page limits are there, word limits are there, then it is a boundary on the individual thinking, and he should be very cautious about fitting into the boundary and giving a more judicious expressions or ideas that he wants to write. He cannot write anything, only the boundaries are not important. So what he writes, whether quality responses he is going to write, is also to be looked at. Know the merit and limitation of each kind of questions. So that means here, each kind of questions that we have already talked about have come with their own merits and demerits. So you must understand when I should use MCQ, when I should use the essay type of question, when I should use matching type of questions, when it is more appropriate, when it is not appropriate. This decision must be known to us once you understand it very comprehensively, these kinds of questions, and try to know what they trying to do us, help us in our assessment procedures. Okay. For example, you want to create a multiple choice item and you are able to create only 3 multiple choices. 4th one you are not able to get. So 4th one, you cannot put none of these or all the above. Okay, if you try to put this as a choice as the 4th choice for every question, it means that this question is not appropriate for multiple choice. Okay, it is an indication that you are not able to create the 4th choice. So therefore, I need to go for alternative question. Can I go for simple short answer question? You need to decide on that. You have to look into that. So if you think that yes, I need to put it only in this multiple choice question only, then you must use all the above, none of these as a choice very rarely. You cannot use that for every item in your question paper. So think that. So each one has got its own limits, merits and demerits. Understand them and try to use them appropriately in your questioning designs. Then we have types of assessment. One is assessment of learning, which talks about only the product, and we call that as summative assessment. After the learning, if you do any kind of assessment, then we say it is a summative assessment. So assessment for learning. So when the learning is happening, so that is during the process itself. If you are carrying out the assessment, then we say it is a assessment for learning, which facilitates learning, which helps you to identify the learning difficulties and trying to address that difficulties at that moment, modify your strategies, modify your style, modify your activities, and try to facilitate the learner. So therefore, it is helping the learner to learn in the desired manner. So if you are trying to do that during the process itself, then we say it is a formative assessment. Then assessment as learning. So that means here we are trying to say assessment is not only for the classroom activity. You must demonstrate that ability even outside the classroom activity also. Okay. For example, how do the parent test the language ability of their children at home? Yes, language teacher can answer that. How parents will test the language ability of their children?
By communicating with them, sir. In
How?
that language.
How, madam?
They can speak, for example, if they wanted to teach English, they can speak English and they can extract the answer in English.
Okay, we'll take our context, Indian context. English is not our mother tongue. Okay, let us say any regional language. If they want to test their child's language ability in that language, you say regional language or language 2, language 1.
Using their grammar.
Vocabulary. Okay, if parent is illiterate, how do they test their child's language ability?
Vocabulary, sir.
How? How do they do that? Okay. Yes, sir.
Sir, first they are going to tell that if the children are making mistake, means they are going to suggest through the notes, sir. If they are not listening to the parent, then they are going to use their hand and legs also, sir.
No.
If the parents are illiterate, means, sir.
No. It is not that way. I'll give you one example illustration. Okay, situation. Like for example, any home, marriage invitation or some social gathering invitation comes to them. Parents are illiterate. They are sending their child to the school. What the parents will do now? Yes, if the child is not able to read and say what is this function is, then parents will say, what is that you have learned in school or in college? So that means they are using the context, real life context for testing. That means your assessment is not only your context based, subject based, textbook based. It goes beyond that. Okay. So that is what we mean by assessment as learning. So that means here, what he learns in school, in any context, he must be able to perform in any other situation also, in the same manner as you expect him. If you believe that he has mastered it here in the class, he should demonstrate even in doing a public debate, public speaking activity also. He must demonstrate that. Okay, not only in your test paper, not only in your school, it must happen everywhere. Only then we say authentic assessment as learning. That means here, when you want to go for authentic assessment, you should make the learners as co-partner in the assessment procedures. You should involve them, you should tell them how assessment is being done, how things are happening, how things will be conducted, how it is going to be evaluated, how the results are going to be declared, how the things are going to be shown to them. So all this process has to be made transparent and they must be the co-partners in all your assessment activity. Only then they will understand the meaning and essence of doing assessment, and they have faith in doing assessment activity. So therefore, that is how the assessment as learning has to be done. Okay, in schools we are talking about only assessment of learning and for learning. Now we have to go towards making assessment as learning by making them. So to promote that, we have different kinds of assessment activity that we do. One of that is peer assessment. So peer assessment is same group of people, same classmates, same class. They can evaluate their own papers, exchanging their answer sheets. Each will evaluate if the criteria are given by the teacher, written on the board or put on a board or in a chart. They will evaluate as per the criteria, and they will exchange their answer script and try to discuss what one has done or what others have performed, not written. They will have their own discussions among themselves, and that is called as peer assessment. Then comes moving towards making self-assessment. So you should know, I have undergone the process, I have performed it, and at the end of that, I have got the complete experience of this process. Then what is the outcome of that? Okay, I do that in my classroom. I give a test. You may call it a C1 or C2, any other test. At the end of the C1 test or C2 test, I ask them, you kindly write down your expected marks. Okay, they will write down the expected marks. Okay, so that means here I am encouraging them to do, you have read the question paper, you have written the answer. Now we have given the criteria of the marking for each of those questions. Based on that, now you mark yourself. Okay, then you try to say what is that you are expecting to be the obtained marks. Okay, so that is how they try to know their whole process of doing assessment. So once actual assessment is done by the teacher and the evaluation paper is given back to them, then they will make the comparison. What was expected, what is obtained. Okay, if the both expected and obtained are equal, then what is the conclusion? What is the conclusion? If the expected and the obtained marks are both are equal. Okay, their assessment ability is more accurate. If there is a variation of 1 mark above or below that, then you can say there is my approximation. I am not going towards the perfectness. I am doing the approximations, and that approximation is deviating. I need to still be more precise in my approach. So it is in that way that will develop their students' self-confidence in their abilities, in their performances, and their assessment process also. So these activities you can also try out and try to see how it works. Then comes your teacher assessment that we do. So we do that by using criterion reference testing. So whatever test we do, we have the reference criteria is our unit or a chapters that we do or the courses that we run. And based on those courses, we frame the questions, and against that we test them and assign the marks. Then it is norm reference testing, where it is applied to the whole region or the entire state, where many of the board exams are conducted. So they are all norm reference testing. They consider the age norm, they consider the curriculum norms and other things, and construct questions based on that. Then finally, now we are trying to go towards the portfolios, where we are saying these are the collection of the important documents of the students' learning performance in that particular academic duration. Whichever is the best one, they are compiled, put it in a file, and it is showcased to understand the individual's learning progress. And then if you want to put that portfolio for assessment activity, then you have to create your own rubric assessment. You have to prepare a grid in which you have to indicate what are the criteria that you are going to look for, and what are the levels at which you want to measure them, 3 levels, 5 levels, any levels, and what are the descriptions that you are going to give for each level. If the child is performing on those levels, I am going to give these kinds of marks or grades. All those things can be seen in terms of your rubric assessment. So what are the tools that we have for doing assessment? So there are many tools are there with us. So you might be using some of them. So just explore them and try to see how these things are done. Now, have you used observation as a tool in your classroom?
Yes, sir.
Yes, your observation, I can use it as a technique as well as a tool. Okay, so while we are in the classroom, we use this as a technique. Just I do the casual observations, the facial expression that the students show, and the reactions that they do in the classroom. All these things becomes my observations factors. If I want to do the observation very systematically, then I have to develop my observation schedule, use that, and then try to document it, and then try to analyze. So observation, I can try to do it in as a both as a technique as well as a tool. I can do that. Then in majority of the cases, we are developing questionnaires, which we use it for test and exam, and we conduct that. And later we can also use the checklist. You can try to see like your attendance is compulsory for your C3 examination, terminal examination. If the student has obtained that percentage or not. So you will compile, add them and try to say, yes, qualified, obtained the requisite attendance or not. So for doing that, you are going to use only checklist, then rating scale. So though you are going to see if the students are performing on the same way, same things, you want to rate them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in that ascending or descending order, then you are going to use rating scale. Then if you want to record an individual's extraordinary performances, exceptional performances, then we are going to write that in a plain paper and put it into his records. That we call it as anecdotal record. Then we have cumulative record. So where it gives you the performance of your academic progression from year 1 to the year ending year 4th year or 5th year, 6th year completely in one go. That is what we call it as cumulative records. Earlier at high school levels, we had this cumulative records. Now we don't have that in practice. So earlier it used to give your progression from class 1 to class 10. If you are there in the same school, every documentation was there. It was talking about your academic activity, your co-curricular activity, your physical development, your vision documentation, and your participation in sports, cultural activities, your hobbies, everything was recorded. And it used to give you the holistic activities that you perform in a school. So it was trying to develop your personality factors through all those things. Then, as I said, portfolio, it collection of all these factors, putting it into your activity, and you can use it as either as a showcase portfolio, or you can try to use that as a developmental portfolio. Okay, like when you visit any public hospitals for your health checkup, every hospital opens a file, gives a name, card, and try to compile your details of your health issues that you have gone to the hospital, and how when you go to the next visit, the same file is taken out and the doctor reviews that and try to diagnose what is the present issue and try to give you the remedial measures. So it is in that way things can be looked at. Then again, interview, it is only one-to-one or one-to-many can be done. Again, interview is can be, it is a tool, I can use it as a tool. And as a technique also, I can talk very casually. If you want to do it very structurally, I can do that structurally and structurally. I can ask questions and try to get the more depth information about the individual or the issues that are involved in that. Then now we talk about focus group discussions, where people are selected of different abilities and the same common issue is posed before them, and each individual is asked to give their opinions on that particular issue, and finally all those things are consolidated and the conclusions are drawn. Then you may go for using project work as your assignment tool. You can do that, and assignments that you give can also be looked into all these aspects. Yes. Okay. Now this is what these tools that we talk about. Now, if you have any questions on those aspects of your assessment tool, so in your higher education level, we try to look at this in terms of your graduate attributes. Okay. So it is whatever I discussed, it is from the school perspective. If you come to higher education perspective, so we try to understand in terms of graduate attributes. So how is that graduate attributes are obtained by the graduate by undergoing this graduation course? If he is a BCom student, what are the attributes of a BCom graduate? If he is a BA graduate, what are the attributes of a BA graduate? If he is a BSc graduate, so like this we try to define what are those qualities one should possess by undergoing this course. What was he, and by undergoing this course, how he is going to transform himself into a graduate, and when he is going to be called as graduate, how we demonstrate those attributes whenever demanded in any context or any occasion, how he is going to demonstrate that. Okay, and those attributes are clearly articulated in terms of your program learning outcomes as well as in your each course learning outcomes. So that means your each course learning outcome should match with your program learning outcomes, and that program learning outcome should match with the graduate attributes that you declare for each of the courses that you run. Okay, so therefore your graduate attribute must be clearly spelled out in the beginning. Based on those, you are going to derive your program learning attributes, and to that program learning attributes, each of the courses that you run in any names, nomenclature across different semester, across different years should merge and contribute to attaining to your learning attribute and enhancing the each individual's graduate attributes. So if you try to assess them in that particular parameters, using your questions, using all kinds of activities that you are trying to do it in any other manner, okay, only then we say that your programs are enabled him to become a graduate having those kinds of attributes. Attributes are nothing but a specific qualities or the desired competencies that has been obtained by undergoing this particular course. So if you try to analyze that, put that into practice, in that perspective, we are trying to see assign an assessment in that broader ways. So at the higher level, so we are trying to understand that your competencies through varieties of situational context questions.